Welcome! We're kicking off a new series where we're going to break down the fundamentals of economics, especially for those of you prepping for the UPSC exams. We're starting with a simple story from a Class 9 textbook, but don't let that fool you. The story of this one single village holds the key to understanding the entire engine of a nation's economy.
It's a massive question, right? We hear about GDP, fiscal policy, global markets. It can all feel a bit abstract. But here's the secret. To really get the big picture, you first have to understand the small one. The answer to how a whole nation's economy works is actually hidden in the day-to-day workings of its smallest unit, like a village.
So, let's step into our economic laboratory for today, the village of Palampur. Now, it's a hypothetical place, sure, but it's been designed as a perfect microcosm of the Indian rural economy. By studying what happens here, we can really isolate the core principles of production, capital, and human interaction that drive pretty much everything.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll get to know Palampur itself. Then, we'll get under the hood and look at the engine that powers its economy. We'll see how a huge revolution changed everything, meet the people on the ground, and watch what happens when the economy starts to grow beyond the farm. And, at the end, we'll have a few questions to help you connect all the dots.
All right, let's begin by setting the scene. To really understand the economic drama that's about to unfold in Palampur, we first need to get a feel for the place and the people who live there.
So Palampur isn't some isolated village stuck in the past. It's got roads, it's got electricity, it's got schools, the basic infrastructure you need for any real economic activity. We're talking about 450 families where farming is the main gig, but other things like dairy and transport are starting to pop up. It's this dynamic environment that makes it the perfect case study. Okay, now we're getting to the core theory, and this part is absolutely crucial, especially if you're studying for the civil services exams, because this is a bedrock concept in economics. So what are the essential ingredients you need to produce, well, anything, whether it's a field of wheat or a simple taxi ride?
Turns out every single production activity, and I mean every single one, needs these four things. First, you need land, and that includes any natural resource. Second, you need labor, which is just the human effort, the people doing the work. Third, you need physical capital. That's the tools, the machines, the money. And finally, the secret sauce, human capital. That's the knowledge and the vision to bring the other three together and actually create something.
Let's zoom in a bit on physical capital, because there's a really important distinction to make here. On one hand, you have fixed capital. Think of this as the long-term stuff, like a farmer's tractor or a building. You use it over and over again for years. On the other hand, you've got working capital. This is the stuff that gets used up in one go, the seeds, the fertilizer, the cash you need to pay wages. Understanding this difference is key to figuring out the financial health of any business.
And this brings us to a crucial point. You can have all the land, all the workers, and all the machines in the world, but without human capital, nothing happens. This fourth factor is the brain of the whole operation. It's the entrepreneurial skill, the knowledge, the know-how that organizes everything else to actually produce something valuable. Okay, so we've got our four factors of production. Now let's see what happens when a massive technological shock gets thrown into the mix, completely disrupting the balance between them. That shock was the Green Revolution, and believe me, it changed Indian agriculture forever. So here's the shift in a nutshell. Before the 1960s, farming was this low-input, low-output kind of deal, using traditional seeds. Then the Green Revolution brought in these new, high-yielding variety, or HYV seeds. But these seeds were hungry. They demanded a ton of water, chemical fertilizers, and pesticides. This one change transformed farming from just a way of life into a really capital-intensive industry.
And the results? They were absolutely revolutionary. Just look at that number, 3,200 kilograms per hectare. That's more than double the old yield of 1,300. This wasn't just a small improvement, it was a quantum leap. It created a massive food surplus and really set India on the path to being self-sufficient.
But economics isn't just about impressive numbers and crop yields. These huge changes had a profound, real-world impact on the lives of the people in Palampur. This is where the theory gets real.
Let me introduce you to Dalla. Dalla doesn't own any land. The only thing he has to sell is his labor. And in a village where there are lots of people looking for work, that's not a strong position to be in. He's forced to compete for jobs, which drives his wages way below the legal minimum. Dalla's story is a pretty stark reminder that economic booms don't automatically lift everyone up. When labor is abundant and land is scarce, workers just don't have much bargaining power.
Now let's look at Savita's situation.
She has some land, but she has no capital. To get in on this green revolution, she needs a loan for the fancy new seeds and fertilizers. The local moneylender, who happens to be a large farmer, offers her one, at a crushing 24% interest rate. But that's not even the worst part. She also has to promise to work on his farm for a fraction of the minimum wage. Savita is completely caught in a debt trap, a classic, tragic example of how a lack of capital can lead to exploitation. And then, on the complete other side of the coin, you have Tejpal Singh. His large farm produces a huge surplus of wheat, which he sells for a nice profit. That profit becomes his capital. He reinvests it in his own farm, buys more machinery, and he lends it out at high interest to farmers like Savita. This is the engine of capital accumulation. Right here. Surplus creates capital, and that capital creates even more surplus. It's how wealth starts to generate more wealth.
So all this new wealth from the agricultural boom had to go somewhere, right? Well, it sparked a whole wave of diversification in Palampur. New non-farm activities started to pop up to meet all the new demand.
With more money in their pockets from farming, people started wanting other goods and services. So, you see dairy farming start up, small manufacturing units making things like jaggery appear, little shops open up, and transport becomes a booming business, moving people and all these new goods around. This diversification is a classic sign of a developing economy, as it starts to reduce its overdependence on just agriculture.
Okay, we've covered the core concepts and the human stories. Now let's put on our analyst hats and really connect these ideas, just like you would have to for a mains answer.
Really think about this. Before the revolution, land and labor were king. But modern farming needed expensive seeds, fertilizers, and machinery. So did the importance of capital just skyrocket? And how did that massive shift affect the power dynamics in the village?
This question gets right to the heart of the inequality issue. Just contrast Savita, who has no capital and falls into debt, with Tejpal Singh, who uses his surplus capital to create even more wealth. How does this one single factor, access to capital, act like a wedge that drives people further and further apart economically? And for our final thought, let's zoom all the way out to the big picture. Why is it so incredibly important for a village like Palampur to develop these other non-farm sectors? What does it tell us about the village's resilience, its employment opportunities, and the overall health of the rural economy when people aren't solely dependent on the success or failure of a single harvest? Have a think on that, and we'll be back to explore the next chapter soon.